Do you believe that people born into royalty, growing up amidst money and fame, will always be protected from the worst tragedies of life? That if you have enough money, enough power, enough connections, then no one can touch your family? If you believe that, then this story will make you think again, because this is not a story about a failed woman. It is also not about a forgotten star. This is the story of Catherine Oxenberg, a mother who had everything, but still almost lost the most important thing: a princess, a Hollywood star, a woman who stepped out from the very secret world of old money families. But all of that could not save her daughter. So what really happened? What is being hidden? Catherine Oxenberg was born on September 22, 1961, in New York, into a family that from the very first moment carried an almost irreconcilable contrast. Her father, Howard Oxenberg, was a self-made American businessman of Jewish descent who built a solid textile empire in the heart of Manhattan, practical, sharp, and completely belonging to the world of modern money and power. Meanwhile, her mother, Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia, was born among the marble corridors of the Belgrade Palace, carrying the bloodline of the Greek, Danish royal families and the Karađorđević dynasty of Serbia, a combination whose family's tree alone would be enough to write an entire chronicle. One side was an empire built by hand, the other was a long-lost royal authority, where past and present coexisted, but never truly harmonized. Catherine grew up with the title of princess, with connections stretching across the European royal families, from Britain, Spain to Norway and Luxembourg, a blood network that made her part of dynasties that once ruled an entire continent. But behind all those titles was a cold truth. There was no throne, no territory, no real power, because the Yugoslav monarchy had been abolished since 1945, a princess, but with no kingdom, a title, but no place to belong. Her parents' marriage, which seemed like the intersection of money and aristocracy, could not last long in the face of such great differences. When Catherine was only 5 years old, the family broke up and she was taken to London, growing up in an aristocratic environment where everything still carried the appearance of luxury, but lacked the foundation of real power, a world where etiquette remained, but its meaning had gradually faded. That is the secret of the upper class, where tradition is preserved, even when its reason for existence has disappeared. Catherine was educated at the most prestigious schools, from the Lycée Français in London to St. Paul's in New Hampshire, and was even accepted to Harvard before transferring to Columbia, a path that anyone could look at and call perfect. But perfect does not mean happy, because from a very young age, her life had been placed under the public eye in a way a child could not understand. At the age of 4, she had already stood in front of the lens of the legendary photographer Cecil Beaton. A small detail, but enough to show the status she was forced to carry. And when she entered her teenage years, she became a model, appearing on the glamorous covers of Cosmopolitan and Glamour, becoming an image admired by the whole world, a perfect face, a life under observation. But behind those photos was a completely different reality. Catherine had to face a long-term eating disorder, a silent battle with her own body, and worse, a secret she only dared to reveal many years later, being abused as a child by a family member, a pain that could not be seen, but never disappeared. That is exactly the glamour on the outside, but tragedy underneath, where not a single diamond can hide the psychological scars. Despite carrying the title of princess, Catherine still had to find her own path to prove her worth in a world that no longer had room for old monarchies. And in that journey, an important figure appeared. Richard Burton, who had once been engaged to her mother, became Catherine's mentor when she was only 13 years old, teaching her acting and opening the door to the arts, a rare privilege, but also an invisible pressure. Because royal blood was both a key and a burden, it opened opportunities, but at the same time made her always viewed through the lens of prejudice, where people did not know whether to admire or doubt, to accept or keep their distance, an advantage, but also a barrier. And then in 1982, when Catherine stepped into her first audition room, everything changed in just one moment. She was chosen for the role of Princess Diana in the film The Royal Romance of Charles, and Diana recreating the 1981 royal wedding, an event that attracted hundreds of millions of people around the world. One role, but it was her own bloodline, not a coincidence, but a strange destiny. In the secret world of old money upper class, where identity and image always intertwined, the fact that a woman with real royal blood played the most famous royal icon in the world created an almost surreal reflection between film and real life. And overnight, Catherine became a star, signed by the most powerful agents in Hollywood, stepping straight into the center of the spotlight that many people spend their whole lives trying to reach. But that spotlight did not come for free. It was always the price of privilege. After the peak named Princess Diana, where Catherine Oxenberg seemed to have fully stepped into the spotlight of Hollywood, the road ahead did not continue with the victories people still expected. It turned, and this time it was no longer a fairy tale. In 1984, legendary producer Aaron Spelling brought her into Dynasty, a global television empire where super-rich families fought for power in luxurious mansions, where every evening gown sparkled like a declaration of status, and every confrontation was pushed to the extreme of drama, like an exaggerated version of the very secret world of old money families. And in that world, Catherine stepped into the role of Amanda Carrington, the secret lost daughter, a character written in after the series had already aired 13 episodes, as if her very appearance also carried a feeling of coming late but full of expectation, a role created to change the game, but also a gamble. At that time, more than 100 million viewers worldwide followed Dynasty every week, turning Catherine into a pop culture icon almost overnight. Scenes like the pool fight with Sammy Joe, where two women in gorgeous evening gowns threw themselves at each other in cold water and blinding lights, not only shocked but also became iconic. A glamour on the outside but tragedy underneath, where luxury was built to hide cruelty. That absurdity drove audiences crazy, and Catherine once again stood at the center of the spotlight. Success was quickly recognized. 2 Soap Opera Digest Awards in 1985, a historic appearance on Saturday Night Live in 1986, an honor no royal descendant had ever achieved. And in that moment it seemed everything had converged. Bloodline, fame, opportunity, all at once lifting her to the peak. But that peak was not sustainable. In the summer of 1986, when her relationship with the producer became tense, Catherine did not return to the set during the European break, a decision that may have stemmed from the belief that her position was solid enough to negotiate. But in this world, nothing is certain. Aaron Spelling's response was decisive. He terminated her contract, and despite statements from her representatives, the media unanimously reported that she was fired. And what was even more cruel was that the producer hired another actress, Karen Cellini, to reshoot the old scenes, even replacing Catherine's face in segments that had already aired, as if she had never existed. A star created by television, also erased by it. That is exactly the price of privilege. When you think you belong to the spotlight, but in reality you are only borrowing it for a very short time. After Dynasty, Catherine did not disappear immediately. That is what is worth noting. She continued to work, appearing in The Love Boat, taking on the lead role in the 1987 remake of Roman Holiday, a choice full of pressure as she had to stand in Audrey Hepburn's shadow. Then the film The Lair of the White Worm with Hugh Grant, and later the action series Acapulco HE8 work was still there, but status was not. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, she appeared regularly in television films such as Still Crazy Like a Fox, Swimsuit, Trenchcoat in Paradise, projects enough to keep her name from disappearing completely, but not enough to bring her back to the spotlight she once had. That is how Hollywood makes you fade, not with a crash, but with forgetting. Parallel to the slowdown in her career were the silent struggles that had lasted from very early on. An eating disorder that began in high school and continued to haunt her quietly through every stage of life. And then, in 1991, Catherine gave birth to her first daughter, India Riven Oxenberg, choosing to be a single mother and keeping the father's identity secret for many years. The truth was later revealed, and it was not beautiful at all. The child's father was William White's Schaefer, a man who was later arrested for large-scale drug smuggling from Thailand. A personal choice, but the consequences were public. Money, fame, royal blood, all were present. But money could not protect you from mistakes in love, and in the years that followed, Catherine's life continued through unpredictable turns. The shocking marriage in 1998 to Robert Evans, a man more than 3 decades older than her, which ended after only 9 days. Then the longer marriage to Casper Van Dien, where they had 2 daughters, Maya and Celeste, and built a happy family image through the reality show I Married a Princess, a family that seemed complete, but it did not last. After 16 years, they divorced in 2015, citing irreconcilable differences, a familiar ending, but it still left a void. In the secret world of old money upper class, where everything looks perfect from the outside, the cracks often only appear when it is too late. And for Catherine, all those upheavals still seem not to be the darkest chapter. Because right in the period when she was trying to keep everything stable, she made a decision in 2011. A small decision, but one that would change everything. In 2011, Catherine Oxenberg took her eldest daughter, India, who was only 19 years old at the time, to attend a workshop in California organized by an organization named NXIVM, a self-development workshop. But hidden behind it was a control machine. On the surface, NXIVM advertised itself as a training program for the elite. Leadership, personal development, structured lectures, wealthy and successful students, all creating an almost perfect picture of the modern golden age, where knowledge and success were packaged like a premium product. And Catherine herself, in the early days, also believed she was giving her daughter an opportunity. But that was exactly the mistake. She did not know that behind that professional facade was a sophisticated psychological manipulation system built by Keith Raniere, a network designed to control people through loyalty, hierarchy of power, and fear. An organization that looked like an opportunity, but in reality was a trap. Catherine soon recognized the abnormal signs and left NXIVM in 2013. But India did not. She sank deeper, moved to live near the headquarters in Albany, New York. And from then on, the relationship between mother and daughter began to crack. Every warning from Catherine was met with avoidance, even resistance, as if the daughter she had raised was gradually turning into a stranger. A family that was once a safe place now became a battlefield. Inside NXIVM, a deeper layer existed, the secret group DOS, where women were bound in a master-slave structure, forced to provide sensitive personal secrets, private images as collateral, threatened that if they left, their lives would be completely destroyed. India was recruited into this group by Alison Mack in 2015, and from then on, her life was controlled in every detail. A harsh diet, sleep reduced to the point of exhaustion. The peak of brutality came in 2016, when she was branded with a hot iron directly on her skin. Not a spiritual symbol, but the initials of the leader. It was no longer a self-development program. It was unbearable pain, a cold proof of how, in the secret world of old money families, even those born with every privilege could fall into perfectly designed traps. Catherine only learned the full truth when a former member contacted her and recounted what had happened to India, being starved, controlled, and branded. And from that moment, her life was no longer that of an actress or a princess with a royal title, but became the battle of a lone mother against a system protected by millions of dollars from the richest families in the world. A mother facing an entire empire. NXIVM was backed by the Bronfman sisters, heirs to a massive fortune, who used money to build a legal system to crush all resistance. Meanwhile, Catherine had no equivalent resources, no powerful team of lawyers, only unshakable determination. Money could protect them, but money could not protect you from a mother determined to save her child. She began collecting evidence, working with Frank Parlato, a former NXIVM executive who had turned against the organization, and brought the entire file to the New York Attorney General's office. At the same time, she went public with the story in the New York Times in 2017, causing the entire NXIVM system to be exposed to the public like a media bomb. Threatening phone calls began to appear, warning emails, even reminders that one trip could be the last. But she did not stop, because in that moment there was nothing left to lose. Thanks to those relentless efforts, the FBI finally got involved. Keith Raniere was arrested in Mexico in 2018, extradited to the United States, and later sentenced to 120 years in prison on charges ranging from sex trafficking to forced labor. His accomplices, including Alison Mack, also faced prison sentences. An empire collapsed, but the price paid was too high. Catherine's real victory was not in the verdict, but in the summer of 2018, when India came home. A simple moment, but it was everything. After going through the darkest years, losing safety, facing fear, watching her daughter being pulled into a nightmare, Catherine started over from the smallest things. Living with India in Malibu, healing together, facing the past instead of avoiding it. India wrote a memoir, participated in documentaries, told the truth, while Catherine founded a fund to help other victims. A life that was once torn apart, but could still be mended. Even when a wildfire in 2018 burned down her house, Catherine still stood up again, with the help of businessman Ellis Jones, who later became her husband in 2023. And while India found her own happiness, got married and had a child, Catherine stepped into a new role. Grandmother, no longer a princess, no longer a star, just a woman who had survived it all. In the secret world of old money upper class, where people often believe that titles and money can decide everything, Catherine Oxenberg's story proves the opposite. That in the end, it is not the crown or the spotlight, but resilience that defines a person. After everything that has happened, after the titles, the roles, the marriages, the mistakes, and a years-long battle to win back her own child, what remains in Catherine Oxenberg's life is not the spotlight, but a very simple question that touches the deepest place in every human being. If one day you had to choose between keeping your peaceful life or stepping into a battle you know you might lose, just to save the person you love, what would you do? Because when India walked through that door to come home, it was not a cinematic moment. There were no lights, no rounds of applause. Only a mother who had waited too long, and a child who had gone through too much darkness to find herself again. One hug, but it contained an entire life. And right in that moment, everything else became unimportant. Not who Catherine was in the eyes of the public, not where she had once stood in Hollywood, but that she had not walked away when things became the hardest. That is what defines a person. Not when you are at the peak, but when you do not give up at the bottom. Perhaps what makes this story haunting is not NXIVM, not the numbers or the verdicts, but this. We can all see a part of ourselves in it, in the fear of losing a loved one, in the feeling of helplessness when we cannot control everything, in the silent struggles that no one else understands. And that is also where all illusions about privilege collapse, because money cannot protect you from watching the person you love suffer right in front of your eyes without being able to do anything. No title can help you sleep peacefully on nights like that. No status can make your heart less afraid. In the secret world of old money families, people often see only the shiniest things, the parties, the castles, the fairy tale love stories. But rarely does anyone talk about moments like this. When a woman sits in silence, wondering if her child will still be safe tomorrow. That is the real glamour on the outside, but tragedy underneath. And it is also the truth that no one wants to look straight at. You may never have to face an organization like NXIVM. You may never live in a royal family or step into Hollywood, but you will understand that feeling. The feeling when you love someone so much that you cannot give up on them, even when it exhausts you, even when it makes you sacrifice everything. And if there is one thing Catherine's story leaves behind, then perhaps it is this. Real love is not the most beautiful things, but what remains when everything else is left. If this story touches you, not because of the glamour, but because of the truth behind it, please hit subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because there are many more lives in the secret world of the upper class, where each story is not just about money or fame, but about people trying to hold on to the most important things in their lives.